Let's take you live to the media briefing we earlier spoke about by the KwaZulu Natal government on the rebuilding process following the devastating floods in the province. Let's take you live there.
Today's update. Next to some of the temporary residential units which have been built to accommodate flood victims by the Department of Human Settlements and Public Work under MEC Jomo Sbiya and eThekwini Metro led by the Mayor, Councillor Mxolisi Kawunda. Early today we paid visit to a number of families who are housed in temporary residential units in the eThekwini Metro in order to ascertain their living conditions, but more importantly to hear about their own lived experience of government's interventions following the floods. While for many of us it is easy to speak about this disaster from the comfort of our homes and offices, the true test of its impact is in seeing and hearing from the victims and those worst affected. We speak about the damage to infrastructure which has had a major negative affecting economic and reserving the gains we have made since the democratic era. While this damage is important to estimate, we are unable to count the full impact this period has had on people, the families and communities in KwaZulu Natal. Currently, the indications are that the floods affected a total of 85,280 people with 461 fatalities. Sadly, we still have 23 unidentified bodies with DNAs not collected. A total of 87 people are still reported missing, with 6,895 being homeless and 50 people who were injured. In all, a total of 27,069 households were affected, with 8,584 houses totally destroyed and 13,536 partially destroyed. During the disasters, we rescued a total number of 249 people alive through our search and rescue operations. We currently still have on the ground a total of 3,941 teams which involve the South African National Defence Force, the South African Police Services, the disaster teams and the Road Traffic Inspectorate teams involved in the sectoral responses to this disaster. The demobilization, especially in the SANDF, will happen in a phased manner, but the specialized team, including the engineers and others, will remain behind. In terms of missing persons, while we are continuing to search, the Department of Justice and Correctional Services is being engaged on the process of presumption of death, where it is proven that we have no prospect to find the missing persons alive. This will be used as the last resort to assist families to find closure. In terms of the cost of damage, the cost of the flood damage is officially at 25 billion, affecting infrastructure network, manufacturing and agriculture. The impact of the floods on eThekwini has been massive, and we believe that while we attend to the entire province, we should speed up our response in eThekwini, because this is where we are to make the greatest impact on reversing the destruction that took place. In particular, settlements located closer to the rivers and washways in our coastal areas, informal settlements, were among the most affected, especially those located in poor terrain. We have learned through a joint study by the eThekwini Metro and the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research that 1.3 million people live within the flood line in the city. We are also told that 33.2% or more than a quarter of all dwellings in the city are informal structures, and these exclude rural dwellings. This poses major challenge to the recovery program and call for a long-term approach which will protect our communities from such emergencies in future. In terms of the progress on rehabilitation and reconstruction, we are pleased to report that major progress has been made to get the province fully back on its feet, with us now entering the second stage, which is to restore infrastructure and revive the economy. While immediate humanitarian relief has been secured, we are certain that all affected persons are safe and that their basic needs have been met. The focus has now shifted to stabilization, rehousing people who have lost homes, and restoration of services, as well as rehabilitation and reconstruction program, which entail building back better. This will involve the construction and repair of major infrastructure. It will also involve the construction of permanent houses in suitable located areas and measures to protect the residents of these areas from such adverse weather events in future. As we continue with the construction of temporary units, our focus is to accommodate more than 4,396 families that were accommodated in halls, churches and schools. We've been able to make remarkable progress working across spheres and with the support and the leadership of the entire national government led by the President. At least 206 temporary residential units have been completed to date, and there is a progress in identifying land for further building. So far, 4 properties under Hulet have been identified. Of the land identified in other parts of the province, 258 land parcels do not have geophysical constraints, with 5% out of these being in eThekwini. And when we say do not have geophysical constraint, we mean of these parcels we can then build on those land parcels. The availability of land parcels that are suitable for the building of TRUs have been a major constraint to the finalization of the challenge of accommodation and has delayed the building of TRUs and the provision of permanent structures as part of the recovery. Provincial government is concerned about people continuing to live in shelters, as this is not only stagnating the lives of the victims, but our social cluster department budget are now getting exhausted. The priority is to get our communities back on their feet and for them to use their skills and talent to live and become productive instead of living in shelters. If there is one thing that we are learning from this disaster, is that our laws and bylaws need to be sharpened to facilitate a speedy response to emergencies. We're noting that bylaw still requires compliance and adherence, even in a disaster, as if a person wants to build a house under normal circumstances. This should change, and so should the application and the funding approach process be reviewed so that we're able to provide immediate relief as well as sourcing of land. We're also experiencing a situation where, in sharp contrast to public procurement to be part of the solution to the disaster, owners are doubling and tripling land prices when approached by government for the rehousing of the flood victims. Consequently, land has become a huge stumbling block to the disaster intervention. We need to debate if existing laws and regulations should not, for the future during disasters, be amended to include the expropriation of land through a swift process. Our laws and bylaws are meant to facilitate recovery and should not, in emergencies and life and death situations, serve as an impediment. We require land that is about 5 kilometers for social amenities like schools, for flood victims, and next to economic opportunities and workplaces. Government has also noted with concern resistance from some established communities who are opposed to the recycling of flood victims on government-owned land next to their properties, under what is called NIMBY, which is not in my backyard syndrome. So we are emphasizing this point, that some people will refuse, even if the land is owned by government, they will say not in my backyard, and refuse for government to house the victims of floods. Yet these communities that are attempting to occupy moral high ground, claiming to be in solidarity with the homeless flood victims at the same time. The reality is that government cannot build TRUs on the very unsuitable land that saw homes being washed away during the floods. And we would want to be clear, there are those who, when engaged, they will resist to support, but then they will portray themselves as people who are so committed to support the victims when it comes to public. So we want, as the people of KwaZulu Natal and all sectors, to be in one around the thinking of supporting the victims of floods. We should share the same common understanding and commitment. With regard to the update on water and electricity restoration in Ilembe and eThekwini, whilst the restoration of water and electricity has reached over 90% overall, there remains a number of hotspots in the province. In Ilembe, KwaDukuza Water has no supply to the power generation plant due to the plant repair and is affecting the Shagaville and Lindelani. Mbozamo is still on the operating rule of closing water at night. With regard to water in eThekwini, the inner west region is almost 90% restored. Outer west supply has improved from 45% to 95%. Central region has improved from 45 to 85. South region has improved from 15 to 85, while the north region supply has moved from 15 to 60%. The eThekwini municipality has made available 20 water tankers which are servicing the affected areas, with 48 static tanks having been installed in strategic points for self-collection of water. In eThekwini, the eThekwini has deployed 190 water tankers to supply water around the city. We are forever grateful to the gift of the Givers Foundation, which has donated 14 boreholes, of which 11 have already been drilled. Meanwhile, the construction and restoration work on the Utongati water treatment works is expected to take up to 4 months, with the completion in September this year. A budget of at least 30 million has been allocated for this work. With regard to economic support to businesses, tourism was one of the most affected sectors during the floods, which took place ahead of the Easter weekend, when many establishments were expecting a bumper season since the advent of COVID-19. In this regard, the floods dealt a double blow to the sector, and we are now in the process of recovering from that. With regard to the development of routes, our recovery plan has been severely hampered by the recent closing down of the British Airways Kulula, and with the limited capacity available, this may result in higher prices for travelers. We are, however, pleased that the Department of Economic Development, Tourism and Environmental Affairs under MEC Pillay now report that hotel occupancy rates are gaining traction and recovering from the disaster of the recent floods. Water challenges at King Shaka International Airport have been addressed, and long-term plans are in place to increase water supply through boreholes to ensure that in future we don't suffer the same challenges. Repairs are underway to the key attractions such as the Mandela Capture Site, the 2 World Heritage Sites, Howick Falls, and the beachfront as part of recovery and reconstruction process. The Bayhead Road repairs are progressing very well, with the execution of the earthwork now in full throttle. Meanwhile, Bluff Road is being used for fuel cargo in the interim, and we are pleased to note that the container terminal has addressed its entire backlog and has released 100% of the delayed important cargo. With regard to rail infrastructure, PRASA has announced plans to resume the Umlazi service line on the 1st of September and the KwaMashu line on the 9th of September. These measures will come as a major relief to commuters who depend on rail as a cheap mass mover. Cell phone network, Vodacom and MTN, which were affected by floods, report that over 80% of damaged infrastructure is now back in operation. The telecommunications sector has, however, raised its concerns about ongoing vandalization of its infrastructure and the repair of roads and electricity supply to speed up the restoration of community services. Our support for businesses through ATIA, we have said that ATIA should lead the provision of funding to 394 businesses that have applied for assistance, which is currently valued at 196 million. The applications are mainly from companies in agriculture, services, and manufacturing sector. With regard to transport, damage to KwaZulu Natal transport infrastructure from the recent floods amount to 6 billion, and this includes the M4 and R102. The South African National Defence Force is implementing Bailey bridges, while the Department of Transport in KwaZulu Natal is leading a massive project called Valama Pothole, working together with municipalities. And this project is patching potholes program. In the medium term, 730 key projects have been approved throughout the province to be implemented through emergency procurement, which includes the closure of potholes and repair to damaged roads. Further, the KwaZulu Natal Department of Transport has submitted 49 bridge sites to the National Department of Public Works for consideration for the Bailey Bridges program. The Department of Agriculture and Rural Development is assisting households and farmers with regard to soil testing services, provision of lime, fertilizers, tools, fencing, water tanks, regraveling, and repair damaged roads, and construction of culverts. The objective is to resuscitate livestock operations on affected farms and further support sugarcane industry, and with in mind the implementation of biosecurity measures. Update on donations. As at the 1st of June, donor account had 3,625,960 rand in total. So the donations that are in cash value that have been donated, it's 3,625,960 rands. I'm emphasizing and mentioning this so that even when the time to account comes, we should know that at this particular time what was in the account. With 100,000 specifically earmarked by the donor for the Department of Health, and about 3 million is also set aside for education, mainly the fixing of 4 schools, while 500,000 from the government of Qatar will be allocated to the Department of Social Development. We wish to acknowledge the generous donations we have received from major donors such as the government of the United Arab Emirates, Spirit Ambassadors International Church, and Sosol. Harmony Gold this week pledged an amount to the tune of 600,000, which is not yet in the donor account, as well as the relief supply donated by Harmony Gold employees in solidarity with the victims of floods. We wish to thank all donors for lending a helping hand to the people in the time of need. We thank all of them, and I must say that also we have said the 600,000 from Harmony Gold, once it comes, it will be redirected straight to support the Department of Social Development, which is currently constrained as it continues to provide food to people who are in shelters on daily basis. With regard to financing the disaster, we wish to take this opportunity to clarify the process involved in assessing the funds which have been earmarked for the disaster by the National Treasury. While Treasury has indicated that short-term immediate humanitarian relief is available to the tune of 1.018 billion, it is important to clarify that these funds are earmarked for disasters that may occur in the whole country during the 2022-2023 financial year. And I think this needs to be emphasized. It's not a 1 billion that is meant for this disaster that we've suffered. They have made it clear to us that it is 1.018 billion, which should take care of disasters in the whole country during this financial year of 2022 and 2023. We wish to confirm that there is no outstanding application from the province either for the short-term humanitarian support or long-term reconstruction. All the applications have been submitted to national government via the National Disaster Management Center. The date for these submissions are as follows. On the 9th of May 2022, for all damaged infrastructure in the province, we submitted to the National Disaster Management Center. On the 15th of May, an application was submitted to access the 1 billion rand for emergency relief. In summary, our Provincial Disaster Management Center has made an application to the National Disaster Management Center for the short-term humanitarian relief support to the tune of 1 billion. Further to this, the province has made a request for 12.656 billion for the municipal responses and the further 5.1 billion for the provincial response. This brings the total applied to 17.8 billion for KZN sector departments and municipal damages. The province has received acknowledgement to this effect, with independent verification of our application having been done by the Municipal Infrastructure Support Agency, MISA, and the Department of Water and Sanitation specialist engineers. We believe that national government is currently processing these requests, and we will be hearing from them in the coming days. In the meantime, all provincial government departments are reprioritizing their budgets in order to avoid the funding or in order to provide the funding of the recovery process. In aggregate terms, our provincial departments are planning to reprioritize 3.6 billion toward the disaster, with these funds coming mainly from conditional grants under the Department of Transport and the Department of Human Settlement. Further, non-infrastructure related funding, including support to businesses, is coming from the Department of Economic Development, Tourism and Environmental Affairs. Another issue of concern is that the grant framework for emergency funding does not allow the release of funding for properties that are insured. It has transpired that most municipalities have insured cover or insurance cover. However, their covers are not sufficient and comprehensive enough for the magnitude of the disaster we have just experienced. The implications are that if government applies the existing principles of the grant framework, municipalities will not be able to adequately fix all the damage that has been incurred. It is against this background that we are raising the need for a review of the legislative regime of disasters. With regard to ensuring funds that they are utilized fruitfully, we continue to emphasize the importance of using funds properly and without abuse or misspending. Our internal audit is working with the Auditor General's Office to conduct audit at the Department of the Department of Education, Department of Transport, Department of Human Settlement, Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, and the Department of Social Development, with physical verification of TRUs having comments already. As we deal with the long-term response to the climate change, the Provincial Executive Council this week endorsed the eThekwini Metro Council aspiration to procure new generation capacity from independent power producers in line with the determination of the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy. In terms of these plans, eThekwini aims to achieve at least 15% of heating requirement using hydrogen as a feedstock by 2030. Furthermore, the city wants to achieve industrial transformation of 15% in petrochemical, pulp and paper, cement, iron smelters, agriculture and gas import infrastructure by 2030. With regard to transport transition, eThekwini aims to increase the uptake of electric vehicles by 6% annually from 2025 to 2050, and to decarbonize transport by introducing fuel cell electric vehicles and gas. The power transition will see the achievement by 2030 of the goal of only 40% reliance on the national grid, with the objective of attaining 100% penetration of alternative energy reached by 2050. The city of eThekwini is home to the majority of our industry, but also it is also home to the greatest population of KwaZulu Natal. As the city adopts green and other alternative sources of energy, it will certainly serve as a turning point to bring on board the majority of the people of KwaZulu Natal in this critical transition. And we want to thank Mayor Kaunda for this leadership. The Provincial Executive Council approved the appointments of new Ezemvelo KwaZulu Natal Wildlife Board under the new chairperson, the chairpersonship of Miss Lydia Johnson. Miss Lydia Johnson is a seasoned community activist and a leader who has had a distinguished career as a mayor, speaker of the legislature, MEC for Public Works, as well as MEC for Agriculture. Ms. Johnson and her leadership collective are tasked with repositioning Ezemvelo as a major tourism draw card in the province and as a custodian of our wildlife and biodiversity. One of the board's major tasks is also to fight crime, especially the dissemination of rhino and other animals, as well as the development and promotion of ecotourism facilities in the province. As we conclude, we would like to extend the province's sincere gratitude to all the individuals, public and private institutions, business, the faith-based communities, traditional leaders, NGOs, donors, as well as locals and international diplomats who have assisted our province in its time of need. We again wish to thank the 3,273 members of the South African National Defence Force who have been deployed in the province along the 4,415 SAPS who are conducting search and rescue operation and helped find the victims of floods and brought closure for many families. We continue to offer our sincere condolences to those who have suffered such personal and immeasurable losses and have undergone the traumatic experiences of pain, injury and loss. Our commitment to the people of this province is that in their honor, we will never rest until we have returned the situation to normal. Our province was battered, but it is not broken. With your assistance and valued support, KwaZulu Natal is rising, and its people will be at the center of a new spirit of hope and revival that now envelops our great province. Let us rise together with all our friends here in South Africa, in this great continent of ours, and in the rest of the world. We look forward to welcoming you in greater numbers to our world-famous attraction sites such as Drakensberg, Ukhahlamba, the KZN Wildlife, the Smangaliso World Heritage Site, the Durban July, the Comrades Marathon, Nelson Mandela Capture Site, and indeed our Golden Coast. Let us work together to grow KwaZulu Natal. May God bless the people of our province and our country as a whole. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable the marathon briefing is comprehensive.
All right, KZN Premier Sihle Zikalala, they're giving an update on the response, aid and relief to KZN after those devastating floods and the progress in rebuilding KZN after those floods. And I thought a very important issue he raised with regards to missing persons, that, you know, the search is continuing. I think it's important for families to be made aware that the search is continuing for missing persons. However, he did say that there will be a presumption of death that is declared where there is reasonable belief that there are no prospects of finding those persons still alive. And he says that is indeed the last resort that the government of KZN will then take.